We did our job to fund the department. It's up to Senate Democrats to do what they have to do, and that's to help pass a bill. They can offer amendments in the Senate if they get on the bill. They can make the changes. Their body can do whatever their body has to do. The House has done its job. We've spoken. And now it's up to the Senate to do their job.
As we welcome you back to America's Forum with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth here, House Speaker John Boehner at a recent press conference saying in clear terms that funding for the Department of Homeland Security is being held up in the United States Senate.
With a newly elected Republican majority in the Senate, it's been expected that both sides of Congress would be able to move forward on legislation. So what's holding up the process?
I got a pretty good idea,
yeah?
But we're going to bring in one of my old friends. Let's go further in depth now with former United States Congressman Bob Walker, who was a candidate for party leadership, who spent 2 decades in the House, and before that was a staffer, and he is Skyping in from Naples, Florida today. So, Bob, it's so good to have you down. We're not going to blame you for the cooler weather in Florida. We're going to look to you to explain how the Walker approach, not Scott, but Bob, how the Bob Walker approach to leadership might solve some of these problems. If you were in leadership right now in the House, what would you be saying to Mitch McConnell and your GOP brethren on the other side of Capitol Hill?
Well, 2 things. I mean, I think, number one, that the judge's ruling in Texas has changed the dynamic of all of this, because clearly at the present time, they do not want to do anything that will change the direction of that particular ruling and what might happen on that. Secondly, I've already told Speaker Boehner that if in fact they run into an absolute stalemate, that my suggestion would be to divide the bill into its 5 different parts. It has 5 titles to it. Divide it into the 5 titles. 4 of those titles will pass, and then have an all-out fight over whether or not Congress has the ability to limit the way in which the Department of Homeland Security spends its money. Because Title V of the bill, which contains the immigration issues, also contains a lot of other limitations on spending. And I think that would be a fight that the Republicans should really want to have, both in the Senate and in the House.
So, Bob, with the Senate unable to gather votes to override a potential presidential veto, is it possible they could see this bill as just write it off and that this is a fight that they just can't win?
Well, what I just suggested is a way in which you can win the fight and ensure that the money is there to run the department. That we don't have the argument used by the Democrats that we are denying the country the ability to have a Homeland Security department that's up and running, and then have a real fight over whether or not Congress has the power to limit the way the administration spends money. And I think that's an important fight, because I think the American people do believe that there should be real limitations on how the departments spend their money. I think that would be a fight that they would be very, very interested in.
And about a minute left. Heretofore, Bob, we heard that, any talk of a shutdown, any talk of a slowdown, Republicans will be blamed. Can Senate and House leadership make the case that it is the Senate Democrats who are standing in the way, standing up for the, quote, interest of illegals rather than standing up for the American people with Homeland Security? Can they make that argument effectively?
I think they can make that argument far better now that we have a judge's ruling that says that what the president did was highly illegal. So you now have illegality that is defending illegality. I think it makes it much harder for the president to use his bully pulpit to make the case that it's the Republicans rather than the Democrats that are doing this.
Bob Walker, I prefaced your joining us before the last break by saying you had some advice that's really out there. That's not to suggest that your feet are not firmly planted on terra firma. It's just that when we come back, given your role as the former chairman of the Science and Space Committee, we want to talk with you about a non-governmental initiative, something called Mars One. Might we see a mission to the red planet within the next decade? And if that planet's red, does that mean it's Republican? More with Bob Walker coming up.
Hi, my name is Ben McLean, and I'm from North Hollywood. I'm currently on tour in New York City with my two-man comedy music act. I would like to go to Mars because I'm curious. I would like to go to Mars because I believe that that planet may hold the answers to some of the greatest unknowns that exist in science.
Back now on America's Forum with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth. We just met Ben McLean, one of 100 finalists for the Mars One project. The mission of Mars One, to establish a human settlement on the red planet.
Oh, I thought you were going to say to boldly go where no man has gone
I could
before.
offer that kind of Captain Kirk-esque thing,
Yes,
but it would...
you can totally do that. Well, a human colony on Mars sounds like science fiction, but it may be closer than we think. The Dutch nonprofit organization intends on sending its first unmanned mission in 2018, followed by sending crews of 4 every 2 years, beginning in 2024.
And a guy who has been studying space and actually legislating about space from an American point of view is the man who remains with us, Skyping, taking advantage of that technology from Naples, Florida, the former chairman of the House Science Committee, former Congressman Bob Walker. So, Bob, this Dutch nonprofit has Mars One. Can any entity go into space with interplanetary travel without the involvement of government at some level?
Well, sure, it's possible to do, and I'm one of the great proponents of the idea of commercializing what we do in space. I will say, though, that there are a lot of hurdles to get over. I mean, building a rocket capable of going to Mars is an extremely expensive enterprise. The other thing is that the people who are volunteering for this, ultimately to colonize, they're being told it's a one-way trip. So that's an issue. And then just going out and raising the kinds of funds that will be necessary for such a trip. I mean, in addition to sending people there, you've got to send advanced supplies there, which means that you're going to have a number of rockets to go out that far into space. And those are going to be an expensive enterprise, and it's going to be a very expensive thing to equip those rockets with the provisions that would be needed on the surface of Mars.
So, Bob, in reality, do you think this show is actually going to happen?
Well, it will depend upon whether or not they can get sponsorship. I mean, I think that the whole goal of this is to find, major companies that would sponsor such a voyage, with the idea that the publicity would be enormous of having people land on Mars and then also be broadcasting back from Mars. So I think the potential is there for sponsorship. Whether or not you can come up with sponsors capable of putting up what will amount to being hundreds of billions of dollars is an open question.
And of course, with that, and Miranda used the term show because they want to do a reality show.
Yeah.
Bob, if I'm not mistaken, about a quarter century ago, this was floated in an article, I believe in either the New York Times or LA Times Sunday magazine. They depicted a spaceship with Mars candy bar logo and almost like a NASCAR stock car. I talked about this, though, with one of my friends who was an Apollo astronaut. He said, look, no way, you got to have governmental involvement. So mindful of that, here we are about to get back into space with Orion. Will this in a way help catalyze and energize the American space program? Got about a minute.
Well, I think it is tantalizing. I mean, clearly where we need to be headed is out into the solar system. I headed a commission a few years ago in which what we said was we need to have a plan to be having humans explore the entire solar system within this century. And we need to begin building the technology to do that. Orion is one step in that technology. I would prefer to see us be developing nuclear engines so that you could power your spacecraft all the way out to Mars and then beyond. That we're not doing at the present time. I think we should be.
And I, for one, am actually advocating the time warp engines as utilized on Star Trek, but that takes dilithium crystals, and I don't know if we're going to find those.
I'm just so impressed that you're using all these fun
Well, it's just stuff
sci-fi
that I
words.
enjoyed. Bob Walker, we thank you. Science fiction, science fact. Let's move from space to Sparta, the Spartan race, and the lessons for us in the here and now when we come back.